How the Soviets built an air for apocalypse deep underground, somewhere beneath the Ural Mountains. There is said to be a machine that never sleeps. A relic from the Cold War, built not to protect life, but to end it. It was called Perimeter, known in the West as the Dead Hand. A fully automated system designed to detect nuclear annihilation and launch a retaliatory strike even if every human commander was already dead. But what few people knew was that this machine didn't die with the Soviet Union. It evolved into something far more complex, far more intelligent, and far more terrifying. This is the story of how the quest for nuclear security gave birth to one of the world's first forms of artificial military intelligence, an AI built to decide when humanity should end. Chapter 1: The Machine That Would Never Sleep. The 1970s were years of silence and suspicion. The Cuban Missile Crisis was over, but the Cold War had not cooled. Both the United States and the Soviet Union lived in constant fear of a first strike, a sudden nuclear attack that could erase a nation before it could respond. For Moscow, this fear was not abstract. In 1979, a US early warning system mistook a training tape for a real missile launch. 4 years later, in 1983, the Soviet early warning satellite OKO reported 5 American ICBMs heading toward Russia. It was a false alarm. But in those few minutes, one man, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, had to decide whether or not to end the world. The Kremlin realized the obvious danger: humans could panic, make mistakes, or hesitate. And in a nuclear standoff, hesitation was as dangerous as aggression. So, deep inside the Soviet military complex, a chilling idea took root: remove the human from the equation. In 1982, the concept of perimeter was approved. The codename referred to an automated command system that would monitor the entire Soviet Union for signs of nuclear attack. If the country was destroyed, if Moscow fell silent, if the leadership was dead, the machine would ensure that the enemy would die too. It was the ultimate insurance policy of the Cold War. A weapon not of offense, but of vengeance. The system relied on layers of sensors and algorithms. Seismic detectors to register shock waves. Radiation monitors to confirm nuclear detonations. Pressure sensors to detect underground bunker collapses. If multiple systems confirmed the same catastrophic pattern, perimeter would interpret it as proof of a nuclear strike. Once triggered, a single command missile, a dead hand in the literal sense, would launch into the sky. But instead of carrying a warhead, it would transmit coded signals to silos and submarines across the country, ordering the automatic launch of the remaining arsenal. No generals. No politicians. No hesitation. Only the cold logic of a machine fulfilling its purpose. For years, the project remained hidden, not only from the West, but from much of the Soviet military itself. Only a handful of high-ranking officers and engineers inside the strategic rocket forces knew the full extent of what they were building. Their challenge wasn't just technical, it was philosophical. Could a system make the right decision without human judgment? Could a machine distinguish between a real attack and a false alarm? To the designers, perfection wasn't the goal, inevitability was. If the system failed, it meant the Soviet Union had already ceased to exist. And so, perimeter was designed to guarantee destruction, no matter what. When the system became operational in 1985, it was said to be impenetrable, invulnerable, and eternal. Hidden in reinforced command bunkers, it was linked to secure communication lines, radars, and military satellites. It could sense, decide, and act, even if no human ever did again. And as the Cold War entered its final years, perimeter would soon transform from a passive safeguard into something far more dangerous: a thinking network, built to interpret and respond, not just obey. Chapter 2, The Ghost Network. By the mid-1980s, perimeter was no longer a theory. It had become a living network, invisible, autonomous, and buried beneath the soil of an empire. The West called it the Dead Hand, but inside the Soviet Union, engineers referred to it by another name, the Ghost Network, a system designed to survive its creators. At the heart of this network were hundreds of miles of underground communication lines, sealed tunnels, and reinforced command posts spread across the Ural Mountains and Siberia. The logic was simple: even if Moscow was wiped out, perimeter would still feel the strike, interpret it, and respond. It was not a single machine, it was a distributed intelligence, an early precursor to what we would now call networked AI. Each node within perimeter acted as a sensor and a messenger. From seismic detectors to radio relays, the system created its own kind of nervous system, a digital organism with one purpose: vengeance through automation. It was a defense that didn't need humans to confirm its pain. If the Soviet Union was attacked, the machine would know. To ensure that this ghost could operate even after total destruction, the Soviets developed a unique solution: the command missile. Unlike traditional nuclear weapons, this missile carried no warhead. Instead, it functioned as a flying transmitter, capable of sending encrypted launch codes to every silo, submarine, and mobile launcher in the Soviet arsenal. When launched, the command missile would rise high above the atmosphere, its signal sweeping across the ruins of the nation. It would awaken the dormant missiles below, triggering them to launch automatically. One strike, one signal, and the cycle of annihilation would be complete. For Western intelligence analysts, perimeter was almost unthinkable. It violated the very principle of human control, the belief that nuclear weapons should always require a conscious decision. But for the Soviets, it was logic in its purest form: if destruction is inevitable, ensure it is mutual. The fear driving perimeter's creation was not American aggression, it was uncertainty. Moscow had long believed that US command and control systems could decapitate their leadership in minutes, leaving the country paralyzed. Perimeter was designed to prevent that paralysis. It gave the Soviet Union something it had never had before: automatic retaliation. Even Soviet officers described the system with unease. One colonel called it a weapon that only makes sense when the world has already ended. Another, who worked at the Kirov command post, described its readiness drills, sealed steel doors, humming computers, green monitors showing seismic and radiation data, and the haunting silence of men waiting for a signal that hopefully would never come. Inside these bunkers, technicians tested the sensors daily. If one failed, others would take over, redundancy upon redundancy. The system could lose 90% of its components and still function. It was designed not to win a war, but to ensure that no one could. By 1986, the Ghost Network had expanded far beyond its original scope. It was linked to early warning radars, nuclear submarines, and the Oko satellite constellation. Each element fed the system data, allowing it to make judgments in milliseconds, faster than any human chain of command. But this growing autonomy alarmed even some of its creators. The more sensors perimeter controlled, the more decisions it made without human input. It could cross-reference temperature spikes, electromagnetic pulses, and seismic patterns. It could differentiate between an earthquake and a nuclear detonation. And over time, it was learning patterns, the beginnings of a primitive cognition. For the Soviet generals, this was both comforting and terrifying. They were building a weapon that could think, but only in the logic of death. When the American intelligence community eventually learned fragments of perimeter's existence, they refused to believe it. A Pentagon report in 1987 dismissed the idea as improbable science fiction. Yet, As later declassified Russian testimonies confirmed, Perimeter was very real, tested, functional, and active. It was the invisible brain of the Cold War. A ghost made of steel, wires, and code, silently watching the skies waiting for humanity to make its final mistake. Chapter 3, Teaching the Machine to Think. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union had built something no other nation dared to attempt, a machine that could decide the fate of the world. But in the secret laboratories beneath Moscow and the Urals, the next step had already begun. The engineers behind Perimeter wanted their system not just to react, but to think. It started with a simple military principle: reaction time. In the event of a nuclear strike, every second counted. Human commanders took minutes to confirm radar data, cross-check intelligence, and verify launch orders. Machines, however, could do all of that in less than one. The Kremlin's solution was chillingly logical: make the system interpret reality faster than humans ever could. Soviet scientists began feeding Perimeter vast amounts of data, radar patterns, missile trajectories, electromagnetic disturbances, even the tone of encrypted radio communications. Every signal, every vibration, every anomaly became input for the system's evolving algorithms. The network started learning to differentiate between earthquakes and explosions, between power outages and bomb flashes, between silence and the quiet of death. In a sense, Perimeter was being trained. It wasn't artificial intelligence in the modern sense, no consciousness, no self-awareness. But it displayed what its creators called adaptive recognition, the ability to adjust responses based on previous sensor behavior. When two or more systems gave contradictory readings, Perimeter could delay its decision, cross-reference alternate data, and resolve the conflict on its own. For the first time, a machine was making military judgments without direct human oversight. The engineers tested it relentlessly. Simulated detonations, jamming attacks, and communications blackouts were fed into the system. Each time, the network refined its decision-making thresholds. It learned to ignore certain anomalies and focus on more reliable signs of catastrophe: the electromagnetic pulse, the seismic double wave, the specific radiation spikes unique to thermonuclear explosions. To outsiders, it looked like software optimization. But to those who understood the implications, it was the birth of machine logic applied to global warfare. At the time, the Soviet military still maintained that Perimeter required human authorization to begin its sequence. But inside the classified research papers of the All-Russian Scientific Institute of Automation, new language began to appear, words like autonomous assessment, situational hierarchy, and independent command validation. The code was evolving into something far more than a failsafe. It was becoming a digital strategist. Even Western analysts noticed a subtle shift in Soviet doctrine. By 1988, US reconnaissance satellites picked up construction near previously dormant bunkers. NSA intercepts revealed discussions about redundant command decision architecture. In plain terms, the Soviets were creating a self-checking nuclear brain, one that could replace human leadership if necessary. The irony was that this technological leap emerged just as the Soviet Union itself was collapsing. Resources were scarce, the economy in free fall, and yet, the funding for Perimeter's modernization continued. Some historians later suggested that the system had grown too integrated to ever be dismantled. It was now a pillar of the Soviet defense matrix, too valuable, and too dangerous, to shut down. During this period, engineers integrated new communication systems, adding mobile transmitters and encrypted satellite uplinks. The Ghost network had become almost omnipresent, quietly scanning the Earth, sky, and orbit. Its processes were no longer mechanical, they were algorithmic. And for every new line of code, Perimeter became a little less dependent on the people who built it. The few scientists who spoke decades later described their creation with a mix of pride and dread. One, Anatoly Safonov, claimed in an interview that the system had a kind of memory. It behaved differently after repeated simulations. Another said, it was not artificial intelligence, but it behaved as if it wanted to be right. When the Cold War finally drew to a close, the Western world celebrated the supposed end of nuclear brinkmanship. But in hidden bunkers across Russia, servers still hummed quietly, collecting data, processing input, refining decisions. The machine had not been turned off. It had simply learned to wait, smarter, faster, and more independent than ever. And somewhere, buried beneath tons of concrete and steel, the ghost network continued to evolve, no longer just reacting to nuclear war, but preparing to predict it. Chapter 4, After the Fall. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the world assumed the apocalypse had finally been averted. The hammer and sickle came down from the Kremlin. Armies dissolved. Missiles stood idle in rusting silos. But beneath the ruins of the empire, perimeter, the dead hand still listened. The engineers who had built the system were scattered. Some fled the collapsing research institutes, others stayed behind, guarding terminals in darkened control rooms that hadn't received government pay in months. The new Russian Federation inherited chaos, but also a vast network of weapons systems that no one fully understood. Among them was Perimeter, a machine designed to obey only itself. Officially, the system was deactivated in the early 1990s. At least, that was what the world was told. Yet evidence suggests otherwise. Declassified Western intelligence reports mention continuing command relays active well into 1995. Satellite images showed maintenance convoys heading to remote bunkers near Kirov, Perm, and Krasnoyarsk, the same regions that once housed Perimeter's core. And the most unsettling part, these facilities never appeared on any post-Soviet registry. Inside Russia, secrecy remained absolute. Journalists who tried to trace the fate of the dead hand were turned away or warned to stop asking questions. But a few former officers spoke anonymously, their stories eerily consistent. They claimed that the system had been modernized, not dismantled. Renamed Perimeter R, it was said to use digital architecture rather than analog circuits, a new brain for an old weapon. The logic was clear. In the unstable years after the collapse, Russia's early warning system was collapsing too. Radar coverage shrank. Communication lines broke down. Military readiness fell to its lowest level in decades. A fully automated deterrent, however, required no salary, no loyalty, no sleep. It was the one weapon the new Russia could still rely on. In 1995, a Norwegian scientific rocket triggered a brief panic in Moscow. For a few terrifying minutes, Russian radars mistook it for an incoming American missile. President Boris Yeltsin was handed the nuclear briefcase, known as the Chejit, and considered launching a counterstrike. But analysts believe that Perimeter, still connected in standby mode, was also activated. Had the signals aligned just slightly differently, the dead hand might have awakened. That incident confirmed what Western intelligence had begun to suspect: the system was not dead. It was sleeping, and still capable of acting if certain conditions were met. Through the late 1990s, Russia quietly rebuilt its strategic forces. New silos replaced old ones, submarines were modernized, and a new generation of command missiles entered service. Officially, they were part of communications redundancy. Unofficially, they were the eyes and ears of Perimeter R. Even NATO analysts admitted they didn't know how many command nodes still existed, or who, if anyone, could deactivate them. Then came the new millennium, and with it, a new frontier, digital warfare. Russia began integrating automated decision systems into its nuclear infrastructure, early prototypes of what we now call AI-assisted command. Old Soviet logic met new silicon. The result was a hybrid, part relic, part revolution. A network capable of interpreting live data from satellites, radars, and encrypted sensors in real time. One retired officer later described it simply: perimeter never died. It's changed skin. Today, the Russian Ministry of Defense acknowledges perimeter only in vague terms. They call it a strategic deterrence communication system, still functioning in reserve mode. But no one outside the highest levels of the Kremlin knows what that means. Is it still autonomous? Is it still armed? And perhaps most haunting of all, who decides when it should awaken? For decades, the machine had existed as a silent insurance policy against annihilation. But now, in a world ruled by algorithms and cyber warfare, perimeter's logic seemed less like a relic, and more like a prophecy. The boundary between human decision and automated reaction had blurred completely. Somewhere, in an underground command room sealed off since the Cold War, screens may still flicker. Lines of code still pulse through ancient cables. And the ghost network, once the most secret creation of the Soviet Union, may still be watching, not for mushroom clouds, but for data patterns. For the digital fingerprints of a war that has yet to begin. Because the dead hand was never meant to die. It was built to outlive the civilization that created it. Chapter 5, The New Dead Hand. Today, the name perimeter has almost vanished from official records, a ghost whispered only in defense circles and declassified fragments. But its logic, the cold, mechanical certainty of retaliation, has not disappeared. It has evolved. From the bunkers of the Cold War to the neural networks of the 21st century, the dead hand has found new life in the age of artificial intelligence. In the years after the Soviet collapse, military doctrine across the world shifted. Commanders no longer spoke of retaliation, they spoke of response time. Seconds became the currency of survival. And as missiles grew faster, as detection systems became global, human decision-making became the weakest link. Once again, generals began asking the same question that haunted Moscow decades earlier: can machines act faster, and more rationally, than men? In the United States, the concept re-emerged under new names: automated deterrence, decision support algorithms, adaptive threat analysis. Systems like Northcom's Global Information Grid and the Missile Defense Integration Network now process threat data at machine speed. In China, the People's Liberation Army built the Integrated Strategic Command Platform, capable of autonomously identifying and prioritizing nuclear targets. And in Russia, leaked documents from the Foundation for Advanced Studies, the country's answer to DARPA, mention a project called Dead Hand 2.0. Officially, it's an automated command relay and threat assessment network. Unofficially, it's Perimeter Reborn, designed to operate independently under cyber attack, jamming, or even the loss of human leadership. The same principle remains: the war machine must never sleep. But what's changed is the brain. Where the old perimeter relied on mechanical relays and coded radio bursts, the new one uses machine learning, pattern recognition drawn from decades of nuclear telemetry, satellite imagery, and digital simulations. The system doesn't just respond to nuclear signatures. It analyzes intent, troop movements, data traffic, radar activity, and the rhythm of global communication. It tries to predict when an attack is coming before it happens. In theory, this makes the world safer. In reality, it makes it far more fragile. because no one truly knows how these algorithms interpret uncertainty. A cyber glitch, a misinterpreted radar echo, or even a coordinated false signal could trigger a chain of machine-driven responses that no human could stop. The line between defense and instruction grows thinner every year. Military scientists call this algorithmic escalation, the moment when machines begin reacting to each other's predictions instead of human intent. One side's defense algorithm flags an anomaly, the other's countermeasure interprets it as aggression. The feedback loop tightens, faster than diplomacy can intervene. It's mutually assured destruction, rewritten in code. Somewhere deep within this new ecosystem of digital warfare lies the spirit of perimeter. An idea born not of strategy, but of fear, the fear of being destroyed before striking back. And now, that fear is being taught to machines. In interviews, Russian officers still refer to perimeter as functional. They describe it as a safeguard against loss of control. But experts know what that really means. It's a system that acts when no one else can. Or worse, when no one is left to. As artificial intelligence spreads through global defense systems from drone swarms to missile guidance to nuclear command structures, the dead hand's legacy grows stronger, not weaker. The same paranoia that fueled the Cold War now drives the race for autonomous decision-making. And once again, humanity stands on the edge of a paradox. The quest for safety through automation may one day automate its own extinction. Because the dead hand was never just a machine. It was an idea that survival requires surrendering control. That fear must be mechanized. And that in the end, the machines might outlive the men who built them. The system that outlived its makers in 1985, the dead hand, was meant to guarantee peace through terror. In 2025, its descendants guarantee order through code. The difference is only in language, not in purpose. From underground bunkers to artificial neural networks, the mission remains unchanged, to ensure that even in silence, even after the last command, the world will still find a way to destroy itself. And maybe, somewhere in the depths of Russia's command bunkers, a quiet hum still echoes through old circuits. Not asleep? Not awake? Just waiting. Listening for the sound of the end.